Hi, I'm Deborah, naturopath at Nourish Health and Wellness in Petone, Lower Hutt. And this week is Naturopathic Medicine Week, proudly sponsored by and supported by the Naturopaths and Medical Herbalists of New Zealand, or NMHNZ. Our theme this year is bringing communities together, and it's our opportunity to showcase what naturopaths and medical herbalists do. I encourage you to check the website natmedweek.org.nz for more events that are on this week around the country and also online. So with me today are Jill Dunn and Liz McNamara. So thanks, ladies, for giving up your time to chat about what you do and why it's important for our public and communities to know. So what I'm going to do is a brief introduction. Jill Dunn is our Politics and Education person on the board of the NMHNZ. She's a PhD candidate and also involved in the redevelopment of the naturopathic bachelor degree, and we'll be talking a little bit more about why that's important to us as naturopaths. And Liz McNamara, who is the president of our board, and Liz has worked closely and in depth with regulatory affairs as they relate to the natural health industry. So Liz is going to tell us a little bit more about why compliance and regulatory wording and things are really important for us as naturopaths and in relation to our clients and the public. Both Liz and Jill are involved in progressing naturopathy towards being a regulated profession. So let's look, today we're sort of going to be talking about why it's important to see a registered naturopath, and also why we feel that regulation is important. And this is all about making sure that the public, you, the public, and our public are aware of what we do and how we do it. So Jill's going to start. We're sort of talking, Jill, earlier about why the standard or the level of naturopathic education is important from a public perspective. So do you want to kind of share your insights into that for us and let us know why that's important?
So naturopaths are health professionals, firstly, and in practice, a naturopath, acts like a natural doctor, in fact, in the sense that they're taking a case, they're doing physical examination, they're developing a treatment plan and following their patients or clients on a continuous basis for improvement of well-being, no matter whether the person has a health condition or not. And many of those people who see a naturopath have really serious chronic health conditions. And so it's really important that the practitioner that the public is seeing is properly qualified to be able to do what the public actually think they can do. And because naturopathy is unregulated, anybody can call themselves a naturopath, and it's a real risk to the public. We have people out there who've done a weekend course, a couple of weekend courses, and they call themselves a naturopath. You've got other health professionals, some of them regulated, some of them not regulated, who again do very short courses and then adopt the term naturopath. And there's been a number of cases in New Zealand over the years, very serious ones. And, the headlines say, naturopath caused harm, da, 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 da. And usually, in fact, all the cases I can think of, they haven't actually been naturopaths. There've been these people who are called natural therapists who adopt the name naturopath, and they haven't had the proper degree training in naturopathy.
So that's interesting, actually, because is it in our, how do we go about changing that? How do we go about making sure that our New Zealand media or the media actually report correctly what the role is? Like if something happens, how do we do that? How can we change that?
It's a big question, Deb.
It is a big question, eh? It just came out of the blue, but I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's not fair. Like I've spent all this time and effort and learning and ongoing education, and someone else is actually claiming the glory, or whatever you want to call it. That's not fair.
I think it's up to the association now to convey to the public what we do, who we are, and what we're doing as a profession moving forward. And you know, internationally, the majority of countries where you have, you know, naturopathic training, the majority of countries apart from Europe, have a 4-year bachelor degree training. In the United States, called naturopathic doctors. You know, Brazil, again, 4 years, Australia, 4 years, Canada, 4 years, Portugal, 4 years, and naturopathy in New Zealand is currently 3 years. And we are working very seriously as a profession to align the naturopathic education in New Zealand with Australia, which is 4-year bachelor degree. And they've just started a Masters in Advanced Naturopathic Medicine. So we're in a point of transition. And, you know, if you think about the practice of a naturopath, the skills that they require are bachelor degree.
I think too, in New Zealand, you know, we are very degree centric as a country. We like people to have degrees rather than diplomas. So I don't think that would be difficult for people to grasp. What's the difference? So from a 3-year to a 4-year, what do you gain from that? Like, what's the additional that you get?
Sure. So let's start from diploma to degree to higher.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So where naturopathy started was a diploma level, and it was a vocational level training. And so, you know, you learn how to do certain therapies a certain way. When things move towards...
It wouldn't be a Zoom session without a dog barking in the background. Mine's locked away behind 2 sets of doors.
When you move to a bachelor degree, there's an increased critical thinking, clinical reasoning, but there's a requirement really to move to a higher level than that, where we bring in, you know, more evidence-based education along with traditional evidence. And in the 3-year programs, there has been insufficient time for the range of modalities that are taught, you know, and those are nutrition, herbal medicine, lifestyle counselling, body therapies, homeopathy. There's insufficient time in 3 years to do that in the depth required. And so that's part of the reason for extending it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree though. I think you know, the 3 years, you spend the first year just kind of running around trying to grasp everything, and then you've got 2 years to kind of learn everything else. So I do agree that it needs to be a bit longer.
I think it's also important to note that, and Jill says this often, that every other health professional does at least a 4-year program. And so whatever field they're in, you know, they're doing that 4th year, and it's really important. Not just, you know, massively for public safety, but also to develop naturopathy as a profession as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just around that, there's only one profession, nursing, that does 3 years, but nursing isn't in the same situation as a naturopath who's acts as a primary healthcare practitioner. And a nurse works in a hospital or in an environment where there's a lot of support, and a naturopath is on their own, working autonomously.
Yeah.
Hence, higher education.
So that kind of segues nicely into the regulation side of it, doesn't it? Where you're right, you know, naturopaths, if we go into clinical practice, 9 times out of 10 we're on our own, or we're working out there without that you know, mass kind of support that you would get from a medical system. So if we take that qualification and then we start looking towards regulation, does that then give us a little bit more networking support, or is that more looking at how that affects and impacts public safety?
Might first of all be really useful to explain what regulation is.
Yeah.
And so that's becoming regulated under the Health Practitioner Competency Assurance Act. So Jill, you might want to talk about that, but it would also give us title control. So it would mean that you'd have to be registered with governing body in order to be able to call yourself a naturopath. And there, you know, I mean, as our organisation already has minimum education standards and, you know, that sort of stuff, but it's definitely putting a standard in place for the type of person who becomes a member or type of naturopath.
Yes, so regulation doesn't alter the therapies that that a naturopath does. There's some kind of restriction around certain things, but as Liz said, it gives title protection. But regulation is there for public safety. It's not there for a profession, although there's a benefit to a profession in the sense of with regulation usually comes higher education and research. So a profession, if you look at professions, they have master's programs and they have doctoral programs, and they're developing their own body of knowledge that develops what they do in clinical practice. So it's not a static therapy that's been delivered like it was, 50 years ago. It's a dynamic, growing
field.
So what other complementary therapies or practitioners are registered under that HPCAA?
Physiotherapy, nursing,
chiropractic.
Yeah. So we'd be recognised alongside that as well, which I think would be ultimately really good from a public facing perspective, eh?
Yeah. And Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
What's that?
Chinese medicine.
Oh, Chinese medicine. Yeah. So, naturopathic sits alongside Chinese medicine really, really well.
So can I just talk to that a minute about World Health Organization encouraging governments all around the world to regulate practitioners, to regulate education of practitioners and products. And has been happening over the last 10 to 15 years, but not as quickly as it could have been.
Yeah.
And part of that problem, I think, is because it's difficult sometimes for governments to understand the difference between a system of medicine. Naturopathy is a system of medicine versus a therapy, and it's much easier to regulate therapy.
Yes, and not helped by the fact that naturopathy is made up of a bunch of different therapies either. But when pulled together, work as a system, and that's also why we need that research ongoing. Hey?
And that system is also preventative, so it's therapy, but it's also got a very strongly preventative arm that could be part of our health system.
Yeah. Oh, can't hear you, Deb. Is that just my computer?
No, it's me, sorry. Here we go. Try that one. So I was just saying, I can't remember, Jill or Liz, one of you mentioned about the products being regulated. So Liz, you were talking about that earlier, about the safety and different things coming in. So that's probably a good opportunity maybe to talk to that a little bit for public awareness.
Yeah, so we have the Dietary Supplements Bill, and that was passed in 1981 or 1985, sorry, and it hasn't really changed since then. And the industry is worth billions and billions of dollars to the New Zealand economy, and the regulation does not reflect the current industry, and it's actually holding businesses back, and it's also holding practitioners back. So in New Zealand, we also have the Medicines Act, and how I kind of tend to think of it is that medicines own a whole bunch of words, and quite rightly, because medicines should go through a rigorous process to prove their efficacy, and supplements, it's quite different. But so for example, a medicine could say that it can relieve a cold or flu, whereas a supplement could never say that, because those words are kind of controlled and owned by the Medicines Act.
Right.
So our practitioners, if they're if they have a website, or they're if they're selling products, that sort of a thing, they have to be very careful about the wording that they're using. So it's almost like developing like a code. So instead of talking about cold and flu, if you're advertising a product, it's about ills and chills and things like that. And you know, that's to keep the public safe. So it's really important that, you know, the compliant language is adopted, but it can be quite tricky to learn.
Well, yeah, because especially when you're working with clients and, you know, you're talking about diagnosed illnesses that they've had diagnosed by a medical profession or a medical practitioner, or, you know, we talk about colds and flus because that's the language that we speak. We don't speak ills and chills. You don't say to someone, how are you? Oh, I'm a bit ill and chill. You sound a bit coldy and fluey.
Just to be clear, when you're one-on-one with a client, like you're kind of exempt from those rules because it's not seen that you're advertising. But if a practitioner, for example, is attempting to write a blog in order to, you know, spread awareness about their services, that's when it starts to get really tricky for them to say different things. Or if they develop their own product line, or, you know, there's a heap of supplements available in New Zealand, it's very difficult for them to be able to talk about you know, in some instances, what has been proven about that herb, either from traditional medicine or, you know, from clinical trials. But according to MedSafe in New Zealand, if you have had a clinical trial, then your product should be a medicine. It should be a registered medicine. And that's obviously a very expensive and time, you know, time-consuming process. And it's not always going to happen.
It sort of becomes a little bit of a grey area for us, doesn't it? Because there's a lot of like herbal extracts and things that have slowly been pulled off the list that we're allowed to prescribe because they're now being regarded as a medicine. And so where does, and I'm just thinking as well, like along those lines with people being able to, I mean, this is the other thing about the act that you were talking about, and you know, the World Wide Web didn't really even exist back then, but now it does. So people are ordering products from all around the world that aren't necessarily complying with our laws. Is that correct? Is that what
you're right. So even though our laws are quite out of date and they do need to be addressed within the next 5 years. Sorry, my dog keeps walking in and out. That's why the door keeps opening and closing. It's not a ghost. So the bill was set to expire a few months ago, and so they extended it for 5 years because they weren't ready with a new bill. So in New Zealand, according to the Dietary Supplements Act, there are limitations to certain nutrients. So for example, in New Zealand, we're only allowed to sell vitamin D for general sales, so off the shelf in a health store, pharmacy, through a practitioner, that sort of a thing. At 1,000 IU. You can get it higher by prescription from your doctor. And the same as B12 is limited to 50 micrograms, but you can get it through your doctor by injection. Zinc is limited at 15 milligrams. B3 is limited at 100 milligrams. There's a whole bunch of rules around just certain nutrients, and that doesn't stop people ordering from an overseas website like iHerb and taking too high a dose. Some of these nutrients are fat soluble, and if they're taken long term, they store in the liver, and if you're not getting regular blood tests, it can cause harm. And the harm is not regulated properly because of our current legislation. So it's, you can report side effects through CARM, but the CARM, the Centre for Adverse Reactions, but that's such a reactionary way of dealing with things rather than proactively thinking, okay, well, what's the rest of the world doing with certain nutrient levels? And maybe 15 milligrams of zinc isn't adequate. It should be a 20 milligram limit. That's to be decided. But yeah, it's definitely limiting in certain situations. It would also be nice to see naturopathic practitioners have some prescribing rights for higher dose nutrients or certain herbal medicines. That would be really nice to see. So at the moment, there's no difference between what you can access through a naturopathic practitioner or what you can buy from the supermarket, with no discussion. So if you're on medication, that's obviously a big safety issue.
Yeah.
There is this common perception that supplements are only good. So they couldn't, you know, I find this a lot in my workplace where people are shocked that there could be a potential interaction with their medication, and that thought, you know, the thought hadn't even entered their mind, because to them the supplement is just good, you know. It's people feel like it's the opposite of medicine and it can only provide good things to their body. And it's funny, right? Because they have this expectation that it will make a physiological change in the same way that a medicine would, you know.
I think, you know, too, I know from being in practice, you get people coming in and saying, oh, I found this at such and such a shop. And I thought, you know, well, it says what the dose is on the bottle and it tells you what's in it. And they're like, yeah, but I sort of thought I'd take more. And they come in and they're taking liquid herbals that are, you know, as concentrated as any liquid herbal blend that anyone would use. And they've decided that they're going to take extra dose. Because nobody told them that they couldn't. And that's always a concern for me, I guess, as a practitioner, that I don't have an issue where people get their products from or what they take, but they need to understand that there are reactions with other things, and not all products are going to be helpful in any particular one particular situation.
Also, the risk gets higher with polypharmacy. Sorry, Jill. So if people are taking multiple medications, which is a reality when people are in an older age bracket, and they're also some of the highest users of supplements, that's really a time when seeing a naturopath is such an ideal situation, because they can really support them to make sure that they're on the right program, and it's not, you know, they can monitor their health to make sure it's the right program.
I totally agree. Jill, what were you going to add?
I just want to add to what Liz is just saying. It's really important because, you know, people are often, you know, they're self-medicating on dietary supplements, and they can be on multiple supplements where perhaps there's selenium in multiple supplements, and when you add up the amount of selenium or the amount of vitamin A they're having, that they're exceeding the recommended, you know, intake, and you know, causing potential harm, particularly in the long term.
And I sort of, the other thing that, I mean, we get as well, so I get you know, in my clinic, I see people who are on a supplement, whatever it happens to be, let's say vitamin C, for example, and they're taking however much they're taking. And I mean, we're not going to get into an argument about what dose of vitamin C is optimal, but they've been told that this particular dose is what they take. And then they won't eat vitamin C rich foods because they don't want to overload their body on vitamin C. So I'm using vitamin C, it's probably not the best example, but there are nutrients out there where they're like, oh no, I can't eat that because it's too high in this. And I'm like, but you're taking that as a supplement. And you know, when we eat food,
the other way around.
It should be the other way around. You should eat food that's high in it so that your body can uptake what it needs, and then use
all the
other
nutrients.
The
micronutrients.
And then just use the supplement for what it is, as a top up if you're actually really, you know, deficient or looking like it. So I mean, it's just another way that we can help the public kind of identify perhaps where they're going with their own health. I think the only other thing
I'll just add to that, sorry Deb, just that supplements are supplementary to a balanced diet, like
Absolutely.
That is actually why they're called that. And I've forgotten what I was going to say actually, but just making sure that things are appropriate is really, really important. So totally agree.
Yeah, and I mean, self-medicating with herbs and supplements is not a good idea either. So, you know, you can't just switch out one for the other and expect the body to just miraculously be healthy and well. I think
just around that, Deb, a lot of the places where these people go and buy the supplements, they're buying them off people that they think are properly trained, and often they aren't.
No, well, I have to say I did work in a health store for a while. I did it after I graduated because I thought I'd get really good experience from the people that worked there, and I was the most qualified, knowledgeable person on the floor, and I'd never worked in the supplements business in my life before that. And I must admit, I came out of it feeling a little bit horrified, I have to say.
I just want to say health stores can be really amazing, and if they've got
Absolutely.
good programs in place for proper staff training, then they're a great community resource. But that doesn't take away from the fact that if you're getting health advice, there should be someone who's qualified to give that health advice. Yeah,
I think that's a much better way of putting it, Liz. Always the diplomatic one.
You're welcome.
I guess too, like one of the things that Liz does for us as naturopaths is helps us get our wording right in our compliance. And the therapeutic claims and things that we can't use. I guess the only other thing I really wanted to kind of dwell on there for a little minute is what to watch out for. So have we got any examples of things that people need to look out for? Or I mean, we talked about the ills and chills and things.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And there is an organisation who does make a lot of the complaints to the Advertising Standards Authority, and I'm really grateful for some of the claims that they make, because it is keeping people safe. So that if people are noticing really big claims like this unique special water can cure cancer and it's only going to cost you $100 for this 4-litre bottle, that sort of a thing. If something's making a massive claim like that, I would, I don't know, use that as a warning sign to just check in with the company, ask them for their research. Part of the Fair Trading Act is that if you're making a claim, you should be able to substantiate it. So they should have evidence on hand for anything that they are saying. But yeah, I would look out for really bold claims that mention really serious disease names. Probably be the good place to start.
Yeah. Jill, have you got anything to add on that one?
No,
I don't.
Sorry,
threw you in there a minute. I think that pretty much covers everything I've got written down here. We were talking about public safety, the nutrients and that kind of thing. Is there anything that you guys think that is relevant to this at the moment that we need to mention, or have we covered?
Maybe Jill, do you mind just talking about all of the topics that are covered in a naturopathic degree, 3-year degree at this point? Like, I just want people to understand all of the areas, like all the pathophysiology, all of the anatomy, all of that stuff.
Generally in their first year, they do a year of anatomy and physiology done over 2 semesters. And they're doing it to nursing standard. The second year, they often there's chemistry, biochemistry, important for teaching nutrition and herbal medicine. And then and they do naturopathic philosophy and all the history and that underpins how a naturopath works. So it's very different. A naturopath using naturopathic philosophy in their treatment versus just somebody giving therapies based on medicines, biomedicine philosophy. In the second year, they do pathophysiology, they do physical examination and laboratory tests, herbal medicine in more depth, nutrition in more depth. Some colleges also do body therapies, and then that extends on into the third year. Also, in each of those years, there's usually research papers. They begin with the basic understanding of research in year 1. Year 2, they go into much more depth with qualitative, quantitative research, being able to read research papers, learning how to do clinical outcome measures so that they can assess a client objectively for their health improvement as well as subjectively. And then in the third year, and usually throughout those 3 years, there's some observation going on as well. Sometimes in year 1 or year 2, and then in year 3, they start seeing clients, and they go from usually working in pairs to working autonomously.
Okay,
right.
I
just want to say one last thing, that it doesn't have to be a choice between a naturopath or a doctor. Ideally, you're working with a naturopath if you're going to see one as a client as well as your GP, you know, like it's not an either or. And the more that we can integrate and work in that world, the better off everybody's going to be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's such a valid point, because, you know, I always, you know, we're often the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff for people where they've seen a lot of different practitioners or the medical. I mean, we get a lot of really curly cases where even you know, the medical model's not helping, and they come to us expecting like a miracle cure. And actually, I think it's really important, and I explain this to my clients when I see them, is that we work alongside what else is going on. And it would be great if it was reciprocated, but I do acknowledge that, you know, we have to kind of work with what else they're doing, and I do that with a lot of my clients. And I think it's a really, really important thing that we're not trying to work against them or instead of. I think it's about having a pool of people around you that support different aspects of your health, of which we are one part. And I mean, we can help pull them all together probably better than any others can. So, you know, potentially, I think that's a really good point. So awesome. I think that's
what naturopaths do really, really well is, you know, in management of chronic conditions, there's a lot of everyday kind of complaints and things that chronic conditions have to live with. And naturopaths, you know, they step those people through, and they teach those people how to manage those aspects of their condition. So it's not just a treatment, it's about educating the person who's got the condition to manage their health more effectively.
Yeah, and also, like, for me, I mean, I always like to think I give people a basket of tools that they can take away and use. So there's lots of different things that you can sort of dip into your basket and pull something out at some point that you think, that's right, that worked for me, I can do that. And often stuff that people haven't thought of before as well, that's really good. I think that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to talk about, really. It's kind of about just explaining what we do, how we do it, and why it's important to the public. I'll get you guys just to stay on the line after I finish the recording, if that's okay. So I just wanted to say thanks for doing this. I know that it's we're all busy, and it's I just really appreciate the fact that you've taken the time out to do it. And just to anyone watching it, just thanks for watching. Remember to check out the Naturopathic Medicine Week website, and keep an eye out for other events that are on at the moment. So I'm just going to finish the recording, and New
Thanks,
Zealand.
everyone.